Warrior Cats, The Sun Trail by Erin Hunter, Chapter 26. With every paw step he took away from the two-leg place, Graywing became more and more convinced that he was doing the wrong thing. That night he slept only fitfully. His cozy nest in the new camp seemed full of thorns and pebbles. When he closed his eyes, all he could see was Storm, so thin and desperate and yet full of courage. As dawn light began to trickle over the moor, Graywing came to a decision. I won't give up on Storm. She and her kits are a part of my family. Families should look after one another. On his way across the moor, Graywing kept a lookout for prey, and pounced on a rabbit as it popped its head out of its hole. I'll carry it to Storm's empty den to help her feed her kits. Graywing saw no sign of Clear Sky or his cats as he padded through the forest, but as he approached the two-leg place, he spotted Turtletail racing away from the red stone dens. Her ears were flattened, and her fur fluffed up in panic. Graywing bounded across her path to intercept her. "What's the matter?" he asked. Turtletail's eyes were stretched wide as he fixed a wild gaze on Graywing. "You've got to come," she panted. "Storm's den is under attack." Without waiting for a reply, she spun around and raced back toward the two-leg place. Graywing dropped his prey and took off after her. An image of the desolate den came into his mind, and he wondered what could possibly attack something so huge. Turtletail must be wrong, but if Storm is in danger, I have to help. Before the den came into sight, Graywing could hear a low rumbling sound, which grew and grew until it filled the whole world, as if thunder was breaking right overhead. The air was thick with the scent of stone and dust and the reek of monsters. Graywing's whole body shuddered with apprehension. Something terrible was happening. As he skidded around a corner, shoulder to shoulder with Turtletail, Graywing got his first sight of the den. He halted as sharply as if he had slammed into a wall. The huge den was half hidden in a cloud of dust. Behind the billowing screen, Graywing spotted a vast monster. Its paws was bigger than he had ever seen before. Its sides were a glaring yellow, and it had shiny silver jaws that were steadily chomping into the red stone walls of the den. "Storm! Storm!" he yelled, but the roaring of the monster was so loud that his voice was drowned. He turned on Turtletail. "I'm going in." "You can't!" His friend's eyes were wide with terror. "The monster will eat you too." Ignoring her, Graywing took a pace forward. But at the moment, with an even louder thunderclap, one side of the den collapsed in on itself. Broken stone flowed onto the path like water. More dust billowed out, choking Graywing and making his eyes sting. For a moment, Graywing felt that he had been turned to stone, his paws frozen to the ground. Surely Storm would have heard the noise of the monster before now. She must have brought her kits to safety. But as the dust began to clear, Graywing spotted Storm's panicked face staring out of a gap in the wall of the den, high up near the top. Her jaws gaped wide in a silent plea for help. "I'm coming, Storm!" Graywing yelled. For a moment his gaze met Storm's, then the yellow monsters took another bite out of the wall. The whole den tilted sideways, beginning to collapse, and the silver she-cat vanished from sight. Graywing and Turtletail crouched close to the ground as the stone crashed down. The roaring was so loud that pain clawed at Graywing's ears. Surging clouds of dust blotted out the den and the monster. Gradually the sound died away. Graywing looked up, realizing the monster had stopped its terrible feeding. Striking to its paws, he raced forward into the debris. Through the dreadful dust and rumble of settling stones, he heard a feeble cry. "Storm!" he called. "I'm coming!" Frantically he dug into the rubble, scraping away shards of stone. He touched over her fur and cleared away the debris with desperate paws until Storm's body lay exposed. Her legs were stretched out stiffly, and her eyes were closed. Dust clotted in her fur beside her, half buried in the wreckage were the three limp bodies of the kits she had tried to protect. "Oh, Storm!" Graywing bent his head to lick her fur, and at that moment Storm's green eyes flickered open. She blinked, focusing on Graywing, then raised her head a little to see the three bodies of her kits. "My kids," she whispered brokenly. "I just wanted to keep them safe." "You did all you could," Graywing comforted her. "Tell Clear Sky I'm sorry." Storm's faint whisper died away. Her head flopped back and her eyes closed. Graywing rested a paw on her chest and bent his head toward her muzzle, but she wasn't breathing. "Goodbye, Storm," he thought, numb with grief. Feeling his heart breaking, he collected loose stones to pile gently on her body. A tiny movement in the dust alerted him. He turned his head in disbelief to see one of the kits, a sturdy ginger Tom, was stirring a little. "He's not dead!" A renewed rumbling told Graywing that the groaning walls of the den were shaking around him. He dug away the rubble and partly covered the kid's body, and grabbed him by the scruff. As the walls collapsed, he dragged him clear, stumbling out onto the path in a chaos of rolling dust and flying splinters of stone. This way! Darting forward, Turtletail shoved Greywing around the corner and out of the worst of the dust. Where's Storm? She asked. Greywing set the kit down gently. Dead, he choked out. And the other two kits, but this one's alive. Just. Crouching side by side, Greywing and Turtletail licked vigorously at the little ginger Tom until he began to squirm feebly and let out a tiny wail. He's gonna live, Turtletail meowed. Come on, I'll help you carry him back to the forest. Ignoring Greywing's protest that he could manage, Turtletail lifted the kit gently by his scruff and set off down the path, Greywing limping alongside her. They didn't stop until they left the two-legged place behind and reached the outlying trees. Let's catch a breath, Turtletail suggested, puffing out a sigh as she set the kit down. Greywing sank to the ground. His pelt was matted and filthy, and his pads stung from walking over the splintered stones. He couldn't forget the look in Storm's eyes as he gazed at him, with the den falling around her. If only I'd gotten there sooner, I might have saved her. I know you're blaming yourself, Turtletail murmured, her sympathetic gaze resting on him. It wasn't your fault. She hesitated and added, You're thinking of Brightstream, aren't you? But this time is different. There's a survivor. Clear Sky has a son. She bent down her head to lick the tiny kit's ear. We must take him to his father. Instinctively, Greywing reached out his paw to scoop the kit toward himself. He didn't want to lose the last connection to Storm. I love Storm too, he whispered. I know, Turtletail's voice was gentle, but this kid is not your son. Greywing let out a sigh. In the midst of his grief, he knew that Turtletail was right. I don't even know what to call him, he mewed. Turtletail bent her face close to the kit's and brushed her muzzle against his. What's your name, little one? She asked. The kit looked up at her, bewildered. I don't know, he squeaked. Maybe Storm hadn't decided on names yet, Greywing meowed. Turtletail glanced back at the two-legged place, as if she was picturing the collapsed den. What about Thunder? She suggested. He was born of Storm, in the midst of a storm of stones and dust, yet he has survived. The ginger kit let out a high-pitched mew. I think he agrees, Turtletail exclaimed, her gaze warm. Taking a deep breath, Greywing rose to his paws. Come on, little Thunder, he meowed. It's time to meet your father. Turtletail bade Greywing farewell, and headed back into her two-legged place. Picking up Thunder by his scruff, Greywing plunged deeper into the woods, staggering from exhaustion as he found the track that would lead him to Clear Sky's camp. Before he reached it, there was a rustle in the undergrowth, and 3 cats stepped in front of him. Frost, Petal, and a black and white Tom Greywing didn't recognize. You're not welcome here, Frost growled, his neck fur bristling. Petal fixed him with a hostile gaze. You killed Fox. It was an accident, Greywing replied, speaking with difficulty around the kit he was carrying. He remembered that Petal was Fox's sister, and couldn't blame her for her anger. Clear Sky knows that. And who is this kit? The black and white Tom pushed up, close to Thunder, who whimpered and tried to shrink away from him. I'll tear Clear Sky, not you. For a heartbeat, the 3 cats glared at Greywing. I can't fight all of them, and he thought despairingly, and I'm so tired of all this hostility. Just take me to my brother, he asked. At first, the 3 cats didn't move. Then Petal stepped back, beckoning him with her tail. Okay, she mewed, but don't even think about putting a paw wrong, or you'll wish you'd never been kitted. The black and white Tom stayed on guard, while Frost and Petal escorted Greywing along the track, one on each side. It's like they think we're spies or we're their prisoners. Clear Sky leaped down from a tree as Greywing and the others entered the camp. He bounded across the clearing and faced Greywing. What do you want? He demanded. Greywing glanced at the other cats, and Clear Sky whipped them back with his tail. When they had retreated at the edge of the clearing, Greywing set Thunder down at Clear Sky's paws. This kid is your son. Thunder tipped his head and blinked shyly up at his father. Clear Sky's shocked blue gaze was fixed on Greywing. Where's Storm? He asked hoarsely. Greywing bowed his head. Storm is dead. While Clear Sky stared at him, stunned, he told of how Turtletail had warned him, and how they had reached the collapsing den in time to witness the death of Storm and the other kits. She spoke to me before she died, he finished. She asked me to tell you she was sorry. Clear Sky shook his head, bewildered, his blue eyes filled with pain. I can't believe this, he breathed out. Not Storm, not such a dreadful death. He paced away for a few paw steps, then turned back toward Greywing and his son. Take him away, he meowed. There's no place for him here. What? Greywing couldn't believe what he was hearing. He's your son! I can't raise him. Clear Sky's voice was bleak. It's my fault his mother died. If I'd stopped Storm from leaving, she would still be alive. What kind of life can I give her kid? Greywing began to understand. If Thunder stayed in the camp, he would be a constant reminder to Clear Sky of what he had lost. How can I raise a kid? Clear Sky demanded. I have too much to do here, protecting these cats. You have cats who will help you, Greywing retorted. Thunder needs you. Clear Sky shook his head decisively. No. What he needs is a father who can take care of him, who doesn't bring bad luck to every cat he cares about. His voice was hard, filled with anger and self-loathing. Graywing knew there was no point in trying to persuade him. Shocked to the depths of his fur, he meowed. This truly is the end of our brotherhood. I don't recognize you anymore. I can't recognize you anymore as the beloved littermate I grew up with and traveled here with. Sadly, Clear Sky nodded. If you can't accept me as the leader of these cats, or understand what I'm trying to do for the good of every one of them, then there's no relationship left between us. He turned and walked away, leaving Graywing and Thunder alone except for the watchful guards. They moved forward, flanking Graywing to escort him out of the territory. Graywing's patience snapped. We can see ourselves out, furballs! He curled his tail around Thunder to guide him, letting him walk on tottery legs out of the clearing and down the track that would lead to the moor. What happened? Thunder asked, sounding utterly confused. Was that my father? Yes, and I wish he wasn't. Are you sure? Thunder persisted. Why didn't he like me? Graywing heaved a deep sigh. It's complicated, but it's not your fault. By the time they reached the camp on the moor, Thunder was exhausted, and Graywing had to carry him again. The other cats rose to their paws as Graywing pushed his way through the gorse bushes that lined the rim of the hollow and padded down the slope. Tall Shadow came to meet him. Who's this? She asked, flicking her tail at Thunder. Where did he come from? Graywing set the kid down. Thunder looked half asleep, not really aware of where he was. His name is Thunder, he told Tall Shadow. He's Clear Sky's son. Hawksloop, her belly heavy with kisses, took a pace forward. Are you flea-brained? She demanded. Why did you bring him here? Clear Sky will use him as an excuse to attack us. He won't, Graywing mewed quietly. He didn't want Thunder anywhere near him. As briefly as he could, he told them of Storm's death and his meeting with Clear Sky. While he spoke, Hawksloop's gaze softened as she looked down at the tiny kit. When Graywing had finished speaking, she nudged Thunder to his paws and curled her tail around him, pressing him close to her swollen belly. Come, little one, she murmured as she headed towards her tunnel nursery, glancing over her shoulder at Graywing. She added, I'll look after him. Tall Shadow gathered the other cats together with a sweep of her tail, then leaped onto the top of the tall rock at the far end of the camp. You all heard Graywing's story, she began. Now we have to decide what to do with this kit. Can we keep him here? I don't think it's a good idea, Shattered Ice replied. He's a stranger. We're not his kin. I'm his kin, Graywing pointed out. So is Jagged Peak. Yeah, Jagged Peak spoke up from where he sat at the entrance of his den. He has a right to be here. But his closest kin is Clear Sky, Shattered Ice retorted. And how do we know that Clear Sky won't change his mind and demand him back? Then we send him back, Rainbow Flower spoke impatiently. If his father wants the poor little scrap, then that's a good thing. But meanwhile, how is he supposed to survive if we don't keep him? It will be difficult to care for him, Cloudspots meowed thoughtfully. He needs milk. Hawksloop is near enough to kidding, Dapplepelt responded immediately. She already said she would look after him. How can you... I said it will be difficult, Cloudspots flicked his ears. I never said we shouldn't try. But is any cat thinking of Hawksloop? Jackdaw's cry sounded argumentative. She'll have her own kids to care for. My kids. It's not fair to expect her to manage another one. Dapplepelt glared at him. She's made her decision. I have a right to, Jackdaw's cry began. Tired of the debate, Graywing padded to the front of the group of cats, just below the rock where Tall Shadow was standing. If Thunder is Clear Sky's son, then he is my kin, he meowed determinedly. This will be his home from now on. Drive him out and you'll lose me too. Graywing! Tall Shadow sounded shocked. There's no need for that. Then let Thunder stay. Tall Shadow gaze swept across the cat's sheep below her. Does any cat object to that? The cats glanced at each other. Rainbow Flower gave a decisive nod. What sort of cats would we be if we refused to help him? No cat argued with her. Jackdaw's cry muttered something under his breath, but he didn't speak his objection aloud. Then it's agreed, Tall Shadow announced. Thunder is one of us. She leaped down from the rock into the midst of her cats. Graywing tipped his head to her in gratitude, then turned away and spotted Thunder sitting at the mouth of Hawksloop's burrow. Clearly he had heard every word of the debate that had raged over his head, and he looked horrified, his eyes wide and scared. Panning over to him, Graywing rested his muzzle on the little cat's head. You're safe now, he murmured reassuringly. From now on, I will be your father.